Hello, my friends. This is Deepak Chopra, and we are continuing our series on science and spirituality, science and consciousness, science and everything that's important for our existence and how it can validate some of the things we are seeking in so far as understanding our own selves. And today, it's my great privilege and pleasure to welcome Caroline Welch. And her book is The Gift of Presence, a mindfulness guide for women. Caroline has a very impressive biography and amazing credentials, which you'll see at the bottom of this interview as a link. You will see her credentials. You'll see a link to her book. Once again, the book is The Gift of Presence, a mindfulness guide for women. And I always like to start these conversations first by saying thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
And the second is, uh, we reach a lot of people through social media, and most of them actually don't know who you are or who I am. It just kind of goes viral. So let's start with just that. Who are you? What do you do? And a little bit about your background, like going back all the way to your childhood and school and college, and how you got to be where you are, right? Taking these books and being such an authority on mindfulness, especially for women. So let's get a little history, if you don't mind. Her story
Her
instead of
story.
his
I
story.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Her story, not his story.
Exactly. Her story for a change. And there are many, many questions in what you're asking me. So I will start with my early life, which was on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. I could not wait to get off the farm. I know that many think that must have been an idyllic place to grow up, but somehow I think about the words of Bob Dylan. I was born a long ways from home. So I had never been anywhere beyond, say, a 20-mile radius of my farm when I received a telegram in high school, and this is back in the day of telegrams, that said Caroline Welch will be going to Shiraz, Iran for the AFS program.
Wow,
Of
what
course,
is the AFS program?
there is a American Field Service
Okay.
program which brings foreign students to the United States, and then we send students to other countries. And my high school participated in that kind of on a fluke. I applied for it, not thinking I would really get it. Didn't even mention it to my parents because we're on the farm, we're busy. If I told them I'd applied to an exchange program, they wouldn't have understood that. And so I thought, let's just see what happens. So when the telegram arrived, the cat was out of the bag. And so the first thing they did is they went to the bookshelf and pulled off the Encyclopedia Britannica to find out what Shiraz, Iran is. And the thing they could relate to is Persia. They then had a reference point, but it was a big surprise to them. Fortunately, my father sold two calves, and my mother justified my departure by saying, "Well, you will not need braces, but your siblings do. So we're just going to pool this money, and you can go to Iran."
Good for you. And then what happened?
I returned. I thought in that summer, I learned more than I'd learned in my previous 16 years on Earth. So I devoted myself to seeing the world and to learning. So the next time I could get away on such an event, I went to the University of Wisconsin, and my school had an exchange program with the historically Black college, Grambling University in Louisiana. So I was one of four white students on a campus of 4,000 Blacks. And I give you these experiences because if someone asks me, when did your mindfulness practice begin? I often said until recently, Well, I would pinpoint it to when I was living in Japan as an English teacher. And I went to the temple nearby to meditate because some of my students who were engineers at Mazda would go to the temple to meditate as part of their corporate training. But what I've come to understand is I think my practice started on the dairy farm. I think it started when it was my job on the farm to pick up the eggs every day and collect them. I can still feel a warm egg in my hand. I know how that felt to put my hand in the nest. I can still smell the hay, the freshly cut hay. And if we take mindfulness and look at it, frame it as being present for more of my moments and more of your moments, the moments that each of us has every day, that's mindfulness in a nutshell. And I can look at these experiences, whether it's being the one of the few white students on campus that really shakes up your world, shakes up your expectations, makes you be fully aware, fully alert, always looking for clues on how to be. Uh, I recall one day we were at a football game, and football is very important to Grambling, and the marching band is very important, and the Black national anthem was being played, and everyone in the stands was raising their hands and their fist, and I looked at my roommate and I said, "What do I do?" Because I didn't want to do the wrong thing. I didn't want to act like I was black or cool or whatever, and I'm not, and I didn't want to be disrespectful. She said, "You stand up." So I took her lead, but I think this too is part of being mindful, just being so open and just having those layers peel away. I am in an environment and I don't know what to do. I don't have the usual patterns that I would have.
So, but as I was reading about your book and some of the writings and looking at your book, you did have a moment of crisis one day, right? You're rushing and you're drinking coffee, you're on the phone, and despite all your background and history, you're pretty frazzled. So, what described that moment?
Yes, that moment was, now we fast forward to the life that I've created. And I am running a small company now, which is built around a scientifically based mindfulness program of Dr. Dan Siegel. And I travel a lot for my work. What I realized running through the airport one day to catch a flight, uh, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a a magazine. It turned out to be the Harvard Business Journal. And in big letters, it said, "Forget balance." And I just thought, oh, I love that. The idea that I could forget this striving to balance and have some kind of mythical mix in my life that would be balanced. And the more I thought about it, I realized none of us is just trying to manage two things. We all are juggling many more things than that. So to just get up from under that pressure I had felt prompted me to look more deeply at balance, more deeply at my life, more deeply at how I could integrate the various roles and responsibilities I have to have more calm and less chaos.
So now are you in Los Angeles? The Mindsight Institute is there.
Yes,
And is
yes.
it part of UCLA? You're still connected with Dr. Dan Siegel?
Yes, he's on the clinical faculty at UCLA.
What is the Mindsight Institute?
Our institute runs online classes, and we try to make the science of mindfulness accessible. When we started the Institute about 15 years ago, the mainstay of our audience was mental health professionals. But as you know, there has been such an explosion in research on mindfulness, such an expansive interest in it, that now in our audience, we have parents, teachers, We have business leaders, lawyers, artists, all kinds of persons who are slowly but surely finding their way to the power of mindfulness.
So tell us a little bit, because again, our audience may not be familiar with the science. I speak a lot about it, but tell us the major highlights of where the science of mindfulness is at the moment and where it's going. Just the major highlights of the science.
Yes, I think we're getting more and more, we're learning more and more about what parts of the brain and how the brain works as a whole. Maybe it's not so much one part, but as a whole, what has what impact. So for example, we know that the default mode network, our midline circuits, that is the home of much of our narratives. Those movies that we all have, those reruns all about us. And we know that if we can get out of that, spend less time in the midline circuits and activate our side sensory circuits, then that's when we are in a state of presence, that is what's activated. And we know that those states can become traits and can change our baseline way of being.
And the default mode network is, you said, where our narratives are, which in Eastern wisdom traditions is the karmic internal dialogue about your own personal story, which actually projects as the physical body, which is the karmic body, as you know. So wonderful to see all this science validating that if you go beyond your ego identity, you enter a broader expanse of awareness. So that is where we are today in the science, and it's very encouraging. But you have a book that's particularly geared to women, and why is that?
It's not that I have created or that there is a special brand of mindfulness for women, but rather that women face certain challenges in our culture. And we have much multitasking going on. We have many roles we play. And yes, it's true, there are so many opportunities open for women. And that comes with challenges. The challenge being that traditionally men as breadwinners and women homemakers, and as we add roles and as we are having careers, then we are oftentimes also expected to really be nailing it when it comes to being a great spouse, being a great mom, being a great mentor, being a great volunteer in our community. So we just keep adding these roles. And the worry work still falls on mom. I know that dads are very active and that dads are driving carpools and so many things, and we have paternity leave, but women still seem to be holding so many things. And I thought there's a real role of mindfulness in the lives of busy women.
In what way will your book help women particularly?
It will help them in offering an invitation to have a look at where in their lives they may be able to get a little more time for themselves, or they may be able to prioritize something in a way that they can then become their most resilient selves. One surprising thing, I interviewed about 100 women for the book. And I think many women and men as well are already present, already being mindful, but don't realize it. And I say that because one of the myths that I think is associated with mindfulness is that we have to be on a cushion or a zabuton or in a quiet garden. And we're practicing mindfulness right now. As we talk to each other without the distraction of our devices or any other kind of interruption. And this is a truly rare kind of way to spend time now. So I think the more that we can find in our ordinary lives, whether it's feeling our hands on the steering wheel when we're driving our cars, or whether it's taking a breath between meetings, whether it's feeling our hand on the front door as we go back home to our families after having been out on an errand or at the office. These are all examples of mindfulness in action.
As you know, the original source of mindfulness is what we call vipassana, and it's also referred to as insight meditation. And first of all, I thank you for doing the book and bringing the science, all the science about the default network, internal narrative. How do you go beyond that? How do you expand awareness? How do you empower women? This is all very timely right now because, as you said, women have more responsibility than men anyway. And, our cultures have basically glamorized the fight flight response, reactive response, conquest, predation, at the risk of healing and what you call balance. And actually, doing nothing is balance. If you stop and do nothing, the body goes into self regulation and homeostasis anyway. So you can stop any moment and do nothing and observe your reaction to react and break that circuit of reactivity any moment. And that's what you're saying. But I want to now go a little deeper because I have this opportunity, and Dan Siegel is a very good friend of mine, and we've done a lot of work together in the past. And right now, there's a lot of interest in what we call the fundamental nature of reality and the hard problem of consciousness. How does the brain produce consciousness, or even does it? And the fact that mindfulness practices can increase neuroplasticity, can foster neurogenesis, can actually accelerate the development of the connectome, even the not only neurogenesis and synaptogenesis, but we know that practices like mindfulness, metacognition, reflective inquiry, transcendence, mantra practice, visualization, awareness of internal space, mental space, ultimately going through what you and your colleagues call the wheel of awareness, you ultimately end up with awareness of awareness. And that's a very classic, very beautiful way to take people through the mindful journey. But let me ask you a couple of things. So, when I'm mindful of sensory experience, that sensory experience as raw sensory experience, if I ask somebody, what is this? They'd say it's a handheld device, it's a smartphone. But before you can call it a smartphone, looking at this is just a color, a shape, a form. Uh, Visually, tactile, it's a sensation, it's a smell, it's a taste, it's a noise. So, true mindfulness is actually being aware of raw sensation, perception, whatever, mental space without actually giving it any meaning. The moment you give it meaning, the qualia experience, the qualia is the quality of awareness, which is color, shape, form, sound, taste, smell, sensation. By giving it a name, you suddenly create a perception. So perception is not mindfulness. Perception is meaning given to qualia. And once you create that perception, you also generate emotions because, depending on how you perceive a situation, is it friendly, not friendly, is this useful, is it threatening? So ultimately, you have raw qualia, qualities of awareness. Then you give meaning, you create perception, and then that generates emotions, whether you like your perceptions or not, which creates these internal stories, which ends up as the narrative in the medial, the default mode network, which is reflected in what Eastern wisdom traditions say the karmic body. This physical body is the projection of the internal dialogue, which is karma, an interpretation of past experiences and perceptions and stories and narratives. And so the ultimate goal should be freedom from all this, liberation. And when I practice mindfulness in this manner, what am I experiencing as raw sensation, raw feeling, raw color? What kind of construct am I giving it? How does that affect my emotions and my behavior and my actions in the world? I come to the conclusion that actually fundamental reality is just awareness, nothing else. It's modifying itself as sensations, images, perceptions, feelings, thoughts, which we end up calling mind, body, and universe, but in fact, and including the brain, because the brain is also an experience in consciousness. So, mindfulness might be the key to solving the hard problem of consciousness, and actually establishing awareness as the ontological primitive rather than matter. Because, and I've had these discussions with Dan, I don't believe there's such a thing called the brain. It's just a human construct for another experience. Visually, it's color, shape, form. And I experience it in the same way as I experience this, or my body, or the Milky Way galaxy. What do you have to say to that?
Well, what I like about what you're saying is the whole concept of awareness and how important that is. And as you're talking, I'm also thinking about how hard it is for us to be aware without judgment. So, one of the things about mindfulness is that we can articulate it in a simple way, if you will,
Please do.
but it's not easy.
Yes, but
That is, you have articulated it in a somewhat simple way, and we can say it's our awareness and be aware of what's going on without judgment. And also be kind to yourself in the process. That's kind of a quick formula that includes the main elements of a definition of mindfulness. But doing it is another thing, because some of this goes against our the way that we humans function in the world. For example, we need to have patterns. I don't, it's not efficient if I have to learn how to make my coffee every morning. So we need certain things that we can rely upon. But as you suggest, in the end, all we have is awareness. And I think one of the most empowering messages of my book is that we can cultivate the confidence that we can deal with whatever comes our way. We can't control world events. Climate, I don't want to say we can't control climate. We can't control it, but we can do something about it. Other people, we can't control other people. But what can we control? We can become aware and control our relationship to events and people. And that's where I think the freedom is and the real power of mindfulness is.
that's very beautifully said. So I've been speaking to Caroline and her book. Can you show your book again for our audience?
Oh, my pleasure to show my book.
Yeah, so The Gift of Presence, a mindfulness guide for women by Caroline Welch, and she is part of the Mindsight Institute. They do a lot of research on neuroplasticity, on actually the connection between mindfulness and emotional health, physical health, and ultimately, what I would say the ultimate goal is spiritual freedom. So you're not a bundle of conditioned reflex and nerves constantly being triggered by people and circumstance into predictable outcomes. Mindfulness makes you aware that you're not an algorithm, that the awareness of a thought is not a thought, that the awareness of a perception is not a perception, that the awareness of a sensation is not a sensation. So that awareness fundamentally is free from its limited expressions, whether they are perception or cognition or thought or emotion. Awareness is fundamentally free. And that is where ultimately we go with these mindfulness practices to freedom. In Eastern wisdom traditions, awareness is sat, which means truth of existence. Awareness is existence. It is all possibilities, and it is the source of every experience. There's no experience that is not in awareness. Awareness is modifying itself into experience. And by coming to this level of being aware, frequently also referred to as metacognition, we can actually hope for physical, emotional, and spiritual healing, which is the purpose of this amazing book, and particularly the fact that it empowers women as future leaders of humanity. We're in desperate need of that. So, any last words, Caroline, before we conclude? But I want audience to see your book again. I misplaced it somewhere,
Oh,
and
of course.
we'll send a link. The Gift of Presence, a mindfulness guide for women by Caroline Welch. Any last words?
Yes, as you were just making your just what you said a moment ago, I was thinking about something very simple that your audience might appreciate and take away, which is the difference between I am sad and I feel sad.
Correct.
And this reinforces what you're saying about the fleeting nature of our feelings and our thoughts. And this can give us so much relief and freedom in our lives if we simply take that phrase away.
Can we extend that phrase to there is a feeling of sadness? So I am sad, I am feeling sadness, and then a step further, there is a feeling of sadness in awareness, and I'm free of it
Yes,
because
it's
I'm aware.
exactly. It's putting that buffer, if you will, between ourselves and the phenomenon.
It's been my great privilege to interview Caroline, and check out the Mindsight Institute, check out her book, read it, and hopefully, if you're amenable to it, Caroline, we can do some collaborative research in the future as well through the Chopra Foundation.
That would be very exciting. Thank you.